You and me can agree that performance is important. In the near future, your performance review will probably impact your government job even more. Today, we're looking at one of Trump's executive orders. We're talking about performance management, how it's being changed, and what will it mean for federal employees. And is it just further justification to shrink the government? First off, let's break down how performance is currently measured in the federal government. Many federal agencies use a 5-tier system. Not all of them, but most do, and it looks a little something like this. You have unsatisfactory, not meeting expectations; minimally satisfactory, just scraping by; fully successful, meeting all basic requirements; exceeds fully, doing more than what's required; outstanding, exceeding expectations by a mile. But here's the thing, these standards, they vary. Not just between agencies, but also between offices and between people, between supervisors. You could be doing your task and duties every day for one supervisor and he thinks it's amazing. That supervisor says, wow, you're outstanding. And you could be doing the same work underneath another supervisor and you could be found lacking. You could be barely cutting it for fully successful. A lot of this depends on the personality and how well they get along with one another. Now, these reviews, these appraisals, they're supposed to be objective. They're supposed to be clear and measurable, but oftentimes they're not. And then you have situations where an employee gets a fully successful and they're enraged. They get so upset and they say, how dare you give me a fully successful? For the past 10 years in the government, I've only received outstanding. You must have a vendetta against me. You must have something against me. You want to see my downfall, and that's why you would dare to give me a fully successful. So then they rush to go file an appeal. And this is evident from the number of appeals that we receive every single year in the federal government. The number's over 5,000. Now, it's not all because of their performance reviews. Sometimes it's because of termination. Sometimes it's because of suspension. But there are a lot of appeals being filed. The acting director of OPM is rolling out new performance metrics. These changes are supposed to align with Trump's executive order and his vision for prioritizing merit and excellence. But what does that even mean? The reform isn't about giving people gold stars or bigger bonuses. It's to identify low performers so you can go ahead and cut them out when it comes time for a RIF, when it comes down to a reduction in force. So with reduction in forces, there's certain priorities, right? Performance isn't one of the top ones. If you look at it, number 1 is tenure of employment. Number 2 is veterans preference. And then you have length of service. But now we're seeing this new system trying to prioritize, trying to elevate performance. Maybe that makes it to the number 1 spot. We don't know. This could be a good thing if you're a high performer, because what really demoralizes a high performer or just an average performer is when you see that low performer on the team and they're treated the same way, they're getting the same bonus, maybe they're even getting a bigger bonus than you, and you know they're doing half the work that you're doing. Nobody likes to see that. That really brings a team down. So let's get into the details of Title 5, Chapters 43 and 75. These govern performance-based actions. In Chapter 43, it's all about improvement, not just firing. It requires a performance plan, which is typically referred to as a PIP, a performance improvement plan, and a reasonable time for that employee to get better. Now, both chapters require at least 30 days notice for any demotion or removal. And if an employee isn't happy, they can appeal to the board, the MSPB. Now, agencies actually report how many times employees are appealing. And the number 1 agencies, when you're talking about the volume of appeals, the number 1 is Veterans Affairs. And this is because it's a large agency and there's always a lot of turnover every year. I worked for the VA for a couple of years, downtown Washington, D.C., right behind the White House. There was a lady on the 3rd or 4th floor. She had a lot of cases where she failed to follow instructions, had a little bit of an attitude problem. Now, her supervisor was trying to get her out of the agency. She wanted her gone completely. But what ended up happening after about 2 or 3 months, she left OIT and she moved to VBA. So OIT, Office of Information Technology, is a sub-agency under the VA, and the same thing with VBA is a sub-agency under the VA. So she left one sub-agency, she went across the street to another sub-agency, still under the VA umbrella. And this kind of goes to show it happens quite often where a supervisor is trying to get rid of a poor performer, but what ends up easier, you try to avoid the paperwork, what is easier to get done is to do a transfer. So this push for reform comes along with other actions by Trump to shrink the government size, hiring freezes, return to office mandates, and making government jobs at will. But not everybody's on board. A judge in Massachusetts recently stopped the deferred resignation program. And this was a huge deal. You had over 60,000, maybe 65,000 people that were willing to accept it, that were looking forward to the next steps in their life. And then the unions file a lawsuit. A judge decides, okay, we're going to pause everything and I'm going to reflect and I'll have my ruling. When are they going to have the ruling? He didn't say when he's going to have the ruling. He didn't say, hey, on Friday by noon, I'll go ahead and do a ruling. There is no date as of right now. As of the time of recording, there's no information, which has everyone tense in DC. So what does all this mean for federal workers? If you're on the lower end of performance, you could be sweating. This could be a big deal to you. But if you're on the higher end of performance, this could be good news, depending on how you take it, depending on how much you believe it. But what's important to understand, I think, is right now we have 70% of federal employees, they're on the GS pay band. And then another pay band you may be familiar with is the NH. That's primarily in the Department of Defense. NH allows you to get bigger bonuses and you can accelerate on the pay band. So you can skip multiple steps. It's not steps like a GS pay band, but it's somewhat similar because you can get pay raises. It's pay for performance, so to speak. So if you perform well, you can get an outsized cut of the money. So it could resemble something like that. I think what most people are worried about is in the case where OPM is telling supervisors, hey, there's certain quotas. You have to pick one person that's not meeting standards. That's not really going to be fair. If you look at the military, look at the commissioned officers and their OERs. So they have something called forced distribution. Senior raters can only give a certain percent that top spot. They can't just give it to everybody. It will also be more important on how you track your own performance. Like you probably know, you have a supervisor. That supervisor is just not reviewing your performance most of the time. They typically have a team. They're not going to know exactly what you're doing every day, every week of the month. So it's on you, really. I tell most people you should have a notepad or a Word document on your desktop, and every time you achieve something of significance, you should type it up, like in a bullet format. Today, I gave a presentation, PowerPoint, to 40 people, and I explained what my office does. So type that up. Or I reviewed a compliance document. I communicated and facilitated this meeting in order to get this document pushed through, and that could be an achievement. So you write it up, and you want to keep it. You want to keep it like 20, 30 different achievements by the end of the year. So you're giving the feedback. You're essentially writing it for the most part. And then your supervisor is looking at it and saying, okay, yeah, you're right. Or, hey, can you tell me about this some more? But you want to have it that way. You want to take the initiative and lead it that way because that's your permanent record. In some cases, you're attaching your performance appraisal or your performance review, you're attaching it to other job applications in the federal government. So you're your best advocate. Nobody wants you to have a better evaluation than you. You should want it the most, so you should really be proactive with it. Also, OPM sent out a directive just last Friday. They're looking for some key performance information coming from federal agencies. Specifically, they want people who have achieved less than fully successful. So we just talked about it. There's two categories underneath fully successful. They want all those names. They want their duty position. They want their duty station. They want their job series. They want all the information. So this has a lot of people worried. If you did get a poor evaluation, could you potentially be targeted? And if any actions under Chapter 43 or 75 been taken, and if these actions are under appeal, this directive shows a clear intent to enforce the consequences of poor performance. They want to see where are the lags in performance, and then they want to do something about it. So in this new climate, in this new culture, it's never been more important than now that when you go into an interview, that you make sure that your supervisor is going to be agreeable with you, that your supervisor is somebody that you actually want to work with. So many people go into an interview and they're nervous about the questions about how are they going to sound? I'm being judged right now. Will I get the job offer? What am I going to do? But not enough of us actually look at the hiring manager and ask the question if you don't know. Say, who does this position report to? Look at the hiring manager. Look at their nonverbal communication. Look at their demeanor. Try to gauge their personality and say, do I want to work for this individual? Does this person seem reasonable? Does this person seem amicable? Is this going to be a good connection? Or am I going to find myself kicked to the curb 3 to 6 months from now because I can't work with this person? So be selective in that regard. If you are on the job search, you should know that even though we're under a federal hiring freeze, there's over 6,000 open jobs to the public, open to the public. You can apply to them today. If you want help on how to navigate that, make sure your filters are set so that you're only looking at the jobs that are actually exempt from the hiring freeze. If you need that information, I want you to check this video out next. If you need a federal resume example, check out the links down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.